talk session. We were supposed to have 8, but it went to 10. So before we get started, just one, or actually 2 announcements. First, you might be wondering what this little fella is. If you went to a particular museum the other night, this is the plushy form of the megacolon. It is going to be up for one of the giveaways later today. And if you're going to be around for the afternoon, there will be hotel space for Birds of a Feather sessions. There's already a couple already organized, so FYI. Now, let's get the show on the road. And for our first lightning talk is Finding AIDS Digital Collections Integration.
All right, thanks. My name is Sean Airy. I'm at Duke University Libraries. I'm going to talk a little bit about some things we've been doing to make our finding aids and digital collections work a little bit more harmoniously together. I'm going to show a photo that I took at the Mutter Museum, so it's okay, you can open your eyes. It's just this. This is Benjamin Rush. Rush is he was a prominent physician here in Philadelphia in the late 1700s, also a signer of the Declaration of Independence. We have Rush papers at Duke. Here's the finding aid. We digitized the papers and we put them up online through our Hydra Blacklight digital repository UI. Like a lot of places, we've kind of traditionally done a poor job of connecting the digital object back to its archival context. We're trying to fix that, right? So our new UI, we're at least providing a little bit of a taste of the archival collection when you mouse over it. But more importantly, we're now storing the archive space component IDs in Hydra so we can provide a deep link to get you to exactly the spot in the finding aid where this item might be described. Now, that could be a series, subseries, folder, file, doesn't matter. But if you've used a finding aid before, you know that they're really long, lots of text, lots of HTML. It's kind of cruel to jump somebody right into the middle of one without a flotation device. So we know we needed to change that, fix that a little bit. We didn't really have the luxury of doing a full-on makeover of the finding aids like the University of Florida folks showed us. We just needed to do like a little fresh haircut, like a little bit something different on top. So what we did was we created a sticky title, and in addition to the sticky title, we stuck the corresponding series information up at the top. If you click that series, you will jump up to where that series begins. Often there's some helpful description there that helps put things in context. Now back on the item level, we also added links to view images. You can click that link, and through the magic of the IIIF image API and OpenSeaDragon, you get a nice, smooth, zooming representation of the item right within the finding aid. Also, as you navigate up and down through the finding aid, that series information doesn't just stay where you originally landed. It updates based on where you've scrolled to. The magic behind that is the Bootstrap Scroll Spy JavaScript tool, and this is really useful. I guess it's originally designed to sort of highlight different menus, different items on a menu that's a sticky menu. We're just sort of using it in a different way, but it's equally effective. Also worth noting, our Finding Aids UI doesn't actually use Bootstrap CSS. We're just sort of cherry picking this one JavaScript piece because we really liked it. Just kind of a quick win, something we could add very easily to the UI that we think makes a big difference. So some quick takeaways on the Finding Aid end. We can use Bootstrap without actually using Bootstrap. Making small changes can make a difference. On the digital collections end, getting a lot of value already out of using the IIIF image API. OpenSeaDragon is wonderful, and the more we can do to connect the dots between finding aids and digital collections using those archive space IDs, the better it will be for our users. But it's not perfect. We've got a lot to do. It's still not a very
time. I loved it. It was really wonderful. And at that code4lib, Dan Chudnov gave a really moving and personal keynote that ultimately came down to being about how we as a community had screwed up. They limited registration to 250, I think 250 people that year, and there was a large number of people on the waiting list. A lot of people didn't get in, and Dan made it really apparent that that was a problem for the community. We shut a lot of people out. We didn't invite people in, and we didn't do what we needed to do. So in 2013, code4lib embiggened, and then in 2014 it embiggened again, and in 2015 it embiggened again. And in 2016 we pretty much stayed the same as last year. We registered 450 people this year. but we still had quite a few people on the waiting list, and I felt bad about that. But frankly, the bigger venues sucked. They were like big corporate monster hotels where we'd share this room with 3 other conferences, or we'd share the hotel with 3 other conferences, and they had huge rooms for like seas of vendor tables, and I don't know, they just didn't feel like code4lib places. They didn't feel like intimate in any way. So we decided we didn't want to do that. And we thought a lot about what it meant to like have this feeling for every organizer every year that you have to grow the conference and you have to go to the conference. And so as much as I hate finding myself contradicting Dan Chudnov, and I just feel like I must be wrong if I'm disagreeing with him, I want to say to every future organizer, don't feel like you have to make this conference bigger. Don't feel like you have to grow it, because that's the real cost to the organizers of making it bigger, because a bigger venue also means a much more complex conference. And I don't feel like anyone should have to necessarily go through that. A bunch of volunteers that have never stared down the barrel of a huge contract with a hotel before. So that kind of brings me to my second point, and that second point is this conference registration is too damn cheap. And I know it's a point of pride for a lot of people in this community, but I'm going to tell you that it limits what the risks that the organizers are willing to take. Because again, when you're looking down this huge contract and you've never organized a conference before and you don't have that experience, that looks really scary. And then when you add on to that registration doesn't even cover those costs and you're going to have to fundraise and you've never done that before, that's terrifying. And so you become very conservative. You don't take risks. You don't do things like offer discounted rates to library school students, or to people who are self-funding, or to people from diverse backgrounds that this community, that are still not well represented at this community that we've talked about. So this is my speech to future organizers. Again, you are off the hook. If you want to raise that price, I think you should feel free to do it, because there's a lot of organizations here that could totally afford to pay a little bit more so that we could let other people in. So we could make structural changes at the lowest levels of how we organize this conference to take those risks. So, and I hope that the community will support them. And I would just say that in the future, anyone in the community that doesn't think that's a good idea, please don't yell at the organizers of that year. Yell at me, because you know what? I won't be organizing a conference at that time, so I will have the emotional labor left to tell you that you're wrong, and that we can have that fight. But don't do it with them, because they'll have enough on. So thank you. I love code4lib, and I want to see it grow. So those are my thoughts on how we keep it sustainable. Thank you.
Next up, GitHub as a knowledge base.
Okay, so I'm Heidi Tebby. I'm with NC State. See if that's not working. Okay. Oh, let me do it another way. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about using GitHub for things that aren't code. So this could be documentation, instructional materials. In my case, I'm going to be talking about templates for our high-tech walls and spaces. So across our 2 main libraries, we have 4 large high-definition video walls in public areas and 4 high-tech viz labs and rooms. And we invite members of the NC State community to produce content for these walls and spaces. As you can see, they're various shapes and sizes, so that can be a little daunting. So we specify things like dimensions, recommended font sizes, since people view these walls from different distances, guidelines for where microtall bezels fall, and then other general weirdness of the spaces. So for example, if this room were one of our library spaces, we would probably have some guidelines that say, don't put important stuff at the bottom half of your presentation. Now, getting people to follow those guidelines is a completely different talk that I don't have prepared. So the templates were created across several departments and saved and made available in various locations. So say if we had a patron come in, wanted a template represented by an NCSU squirrel, they would talk to somebody in the libraries and they would get the appropriate template from the intranet or from the library's website or from a server or from Google Drive or from their own desktop or from another librarian. And there might be situations where somebody who's sharing the same template over and over, they just save it on their desktop, so they never know when it's been updated. So obviously that's not ideal. So what did we want in a solution? We didn't want to go to the moon, squirrel girl. But we wanted something that's centralized and accessible by staff and patrons. We wanted the ability to collaborate and comment. We wanted version control. And basically wanted everybody to have access to the highest quality and most recent available templates. And hopefully this would also prevent the existence of isolated templates that were created in one department unbeknownst to everybody else. So GitHub has some obvious features that made us interested in it, and I'm going to talk about some specific ones for templates. GitHub Desktop is an easy cross-platform way to contribute to projects. I don't use Git in the command line 95% of the time. If you're coding, you're probably in the command line, it makes sense, but when you're working with things like Photoshop files or PowerPoint, for me this fits into my process a lot better. And now GitHub also has a way to drag and drop files right into your repo on the website, which is also pretty nice. GitHub also displays some common image formats, so JPEGs, Photoshop files, and also has several ways to show differences between versions of an image. So this is swipe, so you can swipe and see what the changes are. And also GitHub was already being used in the library, so that made it kind of an easy pick as well. So this is an example. This is a shot of the README for the web page. We made a table so people could see immediately what templates we had available for which spaces. So while there are many good features, there are some reasons that GitHub's not a perfect solution. It's not the most intuitive site to use. This is a quote from someone a coworker described as one of the more technologically aware designers I know. That person wasn't alone. I was kind of confused at first too. So just some things to think about. Think about the templates in the organization at the beginning of the process that's generating them. Part of our challenge was that the templates were made across departments, so if we had somebody with interdepartmental sway that could have encouraged collaboration, that would have been great. How soon is soon? Ideally, we would have talked about these things at the beginning, not 3 hours later, and kind of gotten buy-in from everybody. Documentation is important. Markdown is simple. Think about user experience related to your organization, whether or not it's tied to internal processes that don't make sense to anybody else. The act of gathering and organizing files like this provides a great opportunity to do a gap analysis. Consider limitations of GitHub. You can't put files greater than 100 megabytes in GitHub, although there are ways around that. You just have to plan for it up front. Also, GitHub will make a zip file for you of the entire repo, but not of individual folders. So our repository is several gigabytes large, so that's not a great solution for users. Consider how much time you're putting into doing things like perfect documentation, figuring out how to make individual zip files. It might not actually be worth the time up front. Consult with others about which license to use. If you're already using GitHub for code, you may be using something like an MIT license, which is not appropriate for non-code things. And then just in general, embrace changing failure. Something probably won't work. Thank you.
All right, next up, leveraging the public cloud for ILS. So we're,
Start here.
let's get that. There we go. It's not showing.
Okay, hi. My name is Shalom Knisvaker. I'm an Alma API developer, and I'd like to talk about leveraging the public cloud to complement your ILS. So the next generation of SaaS ILSs reduce the IT infrastructure in the library. But we'd like to take that even further with the processes we use to complement the ILS. So our work environment may no longer look like this, but then again, we're also not here yet. But we're getting closer, so we want to help get there. And say we want to help some of the more forgetful students by sending them an SMS to remind them of loans due tomorrow. So what do we need to do? First, we need a data source. For our example, we'll use the Alma Analytics reports, but you can use any data source from your ILS. Then we need to retrieve and process the data. And lastly, we need to send an SMS to the student, and for that we'll use Twilio, which is a cloud communication service. So we'll write it up in Node.js, and our script comes out really nice and simple. And the full code can be found at the URL on top. So to get the analytics report, we call a simple API, the Alma's REST API. Then we parse the results, group the results by the user, and send each user an SMS using Twilio's API, which is also really simple. Okay, so we have our cool little script, and we want to deploy it and run it daily. But we really don't want to set up a server in our local institution to do this. So what do? We can leverage the public cloud. For this example, we used AWS's Lambda, which lets you upload your code and then runs it for you on AWS's infrastructure. So what do? First, we package it up by creating a zip file containing the script's independent Node.js modules. Then we deploy it to Lambda by defining a Lambda function, specifying the language and entry point, and uploading the zip file. Then we schedule it to run daily by creating an event source. That's it. So to summarize, we started with the data source. Then we wrote our script, which retrieves the data using the Alma REST API and sends the SMSs with Twilio. Then we zipped it up, uploaded it to Lambda, and scheduled it to run every day. Did I forget anything? Oh, yeah, that's us. Okay. And thank you very much.
All right, next up, stupid simple JavaScript that makes you a hero, and how to win friends in libraries.
Okay, wait, how do I get?
Okay, it's, we went down to it went to double screen, so you look down there.
Yeah.
Actually, no. What happened to it? Somewhere your slides.
Yeah, right I never know how to do it.
Shoot. We're having someone come up here. So.
Okay. Sorry, I'm Mac incompetent. How do I make the full screen thingy? Oh, right. Yeah, awesome. Okay.
It's not showing.
Sorry.
It's on double screen.
Okay, sorry. Now I've wasted more of your time. So it's totally gauche to stand up in front of this room twice, but I felt like nobody was really drilling home the power of communication. So I signed up to give a lightning talk just to drill home the power of communication. And I want to start off by, if you aren't familiar, or anyway, just reintroducing you to Mashcat, which is a group that's all about communication. It's about mashing up human resources on the data and development sides of the house. It's a community, it's a banner, it's a series of tangible meetings, monthly Twitter chats, and other efforts at embodying the need for increased communications between IT units and metadata units in the library world. To do awesome things with library data, we need to be working in tandem and we need to be communicating. And I would say that we need to be communicating informally. So it's been joked before that my answer to every problem is, what if whiskey? So happy hour can be a really great opportunity to spark communication among coworkers, and whiskey is a really great opportunity to spark crazy ideas, so that's awesome. But whiskey is not required to instigate mashcat action. It's not required to instigate communication. You can achieve informal communication through many means. Maybe that's 10-minute standing meetings, maybe that's over coffee, maybe that's in the hallway, whatever you gotta do. Make friends with your coworkers, talk to them. And create the psychological safety where you can ask questions, pitch ideas, work together. Okay, and what happens when you get people talking informally and working together in those ways? You find out about all of the tiny little things that matter. So we in our jobs tend to be bogged down with the big projects. We tend to be focused on long-term goals and kind of like meeting the needs of certain stakeholders and maybe missing the needs, tiny needs, of other people that matter to us in the workplace. So what happened, to illustrate, when I made friends with colleagues and picked their brains about their areas of needs, one thing I found came up again and again. It came up at my library, it came up at other libraries. I wish I could search on such and such. I wish I could search by printer, by date, on this or that. I wish the search interface took full advantage of the data that we have, the data that maybe that I create, the data that my users need, the data that exists, the data that is indexed. Basically, this need boiled down to, I literally need a search box for that thing. Stupid, simple JavaScript that makes you a hero. So basically, just create a search URL and reassign the window location, right? This is such a simple solution that anyone with basic HTML skills can be empowered to create the custom search box that they need. So simple that you could spin up an embed code generator, something like that. But we had to have the conversation about this comparatively small need in order to address it. So I want to pitch couple of action items for the room. Whiskey's great, but really communication, however that's achieved. Find out about the small things that matter to your colleagues. And then maybe set aside some time every week, every month, whatever it is, to work on those tiny projects. Build that into your day. Why? Because it fosters partnership and collaboration. It fosters brainstorming and it fosters service. Be somebody's hero. Be the lifesaver for someone and make friends with your colleagues, please.
Next up, single sign-on, identity, and systems integration.
How does one? There we go. And for reference, I forgot my lanyard, but if I were wearing one, it would be green. Got it. Okay, so what I'd like to talk about today is single sign-on and authentication. It's a little bit of boring subject sometimes, but you've got to remember is that your user data is library data. So we spend a lot of time worrying about what's the system of record for our monographs or manuscripts, but the fact that many systems require information about users, names, email addresses, whatever, often gets accepted as a given without needing to consider what the downstream effects are. And those are often lots of library accounts. So even though you might have a single sign-on system that makes it seem like it's one thing, for your guest users, often you'll find yourself with an ILS account, an ILL account, course reserves account, digital library account. And as you get more and more services, you have more and more library accounts, places where your data is stored. And how does that affect your experience? Well, if you have a robust central identity provider, maybe not so bad. If you're signing up to use special collections or other library services, it means you do a lot of typing to a lot of forms that are often not very ergonomic. So this isn't a new problem. It's something that's been solved before many times. And if you look at CAS, Shibboleth, WS Federation, other solutions you might be familiar with, it's something that we try to deal with over and over again. But they seem to be dealing with problems that are a little different from what we're working with in libraries. In particular, often we're operating under the auspices of institutions that grant identities in a concrete way, but we also have to have the authority to mint our own. Essentially, somebody comes to the desk without ever meeting the central ITS services or any other identity granting body, and they want to be able to use the material, and we don't want to have to turn them away. So looking through the keyhole for how we might actually be able to deal with that, you have to think about identity as just another service, something that we can look up on the fly or provide to consumers as needed. And the way that we found best to do that was a technology called OpenID Connect, which is identity over OAuth 2. And I'm not sure how many people are familiar with OAuth 2. It's a web authorization framework. But it allows you to have an identity model that's essentially claims-based. It means that any user can have an arbitrary number of claims or facts about them associated with an account, and a single subject identifier that can be passed between applications seamlessly. This means that you can access scoped information, give somebody's email address to one application, their home address to another application, or just their name to a third, all associated with the same data source, all associated with the same identifier, but passed in a secure way. And it's a very modular standard, which means that a lot of open source clients and servers already exist for providing this. And so what do users see? They get a single sign-on interface. In our case, we split it up into CAS and non-CAS because that's what we use and it's what people are used to. And it also gives you a great opportunity to revisit what your sign-on interfaces look like. I hope nobody else's looks like the one on the left. But what it looks like on the back end is a critical separation of authentication from 1 to 3 areas. Instead of having people authenticate directly into apps, they authenticate into a service provider. And when the application goes to retrieve user information, it doesn't get it directly from the user. It asks for information from that central provider, allowing us to control exactly what's provided. And what that translates into that's really neat is it means that applications can specialize. They can pass information between them with confidence, knowing that they're talking about the same thing, which downstream means you can set up trusted digital resources. For example, one of our use cases has an authorization service where a person logs into a streaming video provider, and that provider knows, even for non-institutional users, that this restriction service is talking about the same person, that they have access to view the video. And finally, what's most important is that an OpenID Connect server means you have an OAuth 2 server. And an OAuth 2 server means that you have a secure way to grant access to your APIs. And this is really, really exciting because it means that you can not only get that backend integration that I'm talking about, but it also means you can start setting up a world where mobile apps can securely authenticate in the context of the user. If you have an API-first design, which seems to have been a major theme of the conference, people can sign in with their own credentials to access their ILS, to access resource sharing, to access their user account. And finally, it gives you a secure way to open things up in a scoped way to student developers. So where are we? Guests and local users have a unified login. Library applications can specialize more easily, and you can federate with outside providers if necessary. So while it might seem like we're talking about security when we're talking about authentication systems, what we're actually trying to talk about is how to open our systems.
Next up, code art.
Hi, my name's Allison. I'm from NCSU Libraries. I'm here to talk about a project called Code Art. This is a project that I took over managing last July, and it's in its second year. It was started as a student contest for digital, data-driven, generative art for display on our large-scale video walls in the James B. Hunt Library, which Heidi mentioned earlier. Generative art is art that's created with an autonomous system and can run, for example, on computer algorithms. The Hunt Library opened in 2013, and the 4 video walls that were built into the public spaces of the library were intended to be canvases for the university to show student and faculty work. So the Code Art Student Visualization Contest was created to advertise this intention. It has been sponsored for the last 2 years by Christie Digital Systems, maker of the video wall microtiles. We thought that a competition with a substantial monetary prize, hundreds of dollars, for first and second place winners would be attractive to students, along with getting to exhibit their work in the library. Another aim of the contest was to raise awareness that there is such a thing called creative coding, and to encourage students to learn to code who may never have considered it a possibility. And so by creative coding, I mean essentially just making art with code. So common tools for this include processing and P5.js. Last year in 2015, the contest structure required that interested students submit a written proposal for a project. The proposals were judged and 2 were funded and eventually competed for the final judging. The projects were developed over a few months. The outcome of last year's contest was that we had 2 very impressive pieces produced for the video walls. They were each created with data, code, and could stand alone as art. The winner was Fractal Forests, which uses gate entry data collected with an Arduino microcontroller to make fractal trees that grow on a planet. The sun and moon revolve around the planet and serve as the hands of a clock that move with the time. The WKNC Visualizer, the runner-up project, visualizes the number of listeners streaming the campus radio station online as birds flying over the skyline of Raleigh. The beat of the music was visualized in the buildings with the lights going up and down. In taking over the project in July, I set some improvement goals for 2016, including more student participation, more diverse participation in terms of students participating in terms of their identities and also program of study, and more faculty involvement and mentorship of participants who might be interested in entering the contest. One challenge and potential opportunity there is that the pool of students who already make code on campus is pretty small and hard to identify. There are very few courses on campus related to making art with code. The coders that are in the computer science department, about 1,000 undergrads and grad students, it's not very clear how many are interested in art. We also have a design school of over 800 students, but it's not clear how many are interested in coding. All are adept in design and using digital design tools, however. Happily, 2 new faculty with energy and enthusiasm for creative coding and animation joined the design school last summer. They were eager to help with advertising and mentoring students. They were also creating new classes that involve creative coding in some fashion. We also restructured the contest, doing away with the proposal process and accepting more types of digital art that didn't require code. The deadline is next week for the contest. We also planned a series of smallish events in our makerspace that allow students with no experience to get hands-on exposure to creative coding and make something. These creations would be eligible for submission to the contest. Interestingly, while the workshop and hackathon covered the same tools and both were advertised in similar ways, as no experience required, they drew very different audiences. Perhaps people were dissuaded to enter because of the title hackathon. That may have connoted exclusivity or a certain kind of competition, whereas the term workshop seemed more accessible. Just last week, NPR aired a study from the National University of Singapore that examined the role of gender in competition, found that in highly competitive settings, qualified women may be dissuaded from competing. The larger point from the study is that due to social and structural forces in society, competitions may not be the best way to identify talent. The most talented may not be competing. It may be that more non-competitive programming is the key to building a creative coding community on campus. While we can report this year that we've gotten modest gains in the number of women, international students, students of color, and non-coders who have participated in the program, in the contest more specifically, we have more work to do. So this more work includes shifting focus from it being just a contest to being a more robust and inclusive program, especially more opportunities for underrepresented students. In so doing, and with input from the students, I believe we can develop a community where everyone who wants to learn how to make art with code will feel empowered to do so. Thank you.
Next up, opaquenamespace.org.
might need help with this. I just need Chrome.
Okay, we want to go. Which one's yours?
I just need a web browser, so just Chrome. It was open earlier.
There you go.
And how do I make it present? All right. Hello, I'm Ryan Wick, and I am from Oregon State University. I'm here to talk about a joint project kind of stemming out from Oregon Digital, so that's Oregon State University and University of Oregon. So opaquenamespace.org got a shout out from Stephen earlier, and I just want to talk about it a little bit to talk about what role it fits for us. So OregonDigital.org is our joint Hydra instance. We've finally completed a migration from ContentDM, and as part of that process, we kind of went all in on RDF, and thus had a lot of, say, strings in our metadata, and we wanted to have a way to have IDs for our, say, our local vocabularies or our local people who wouldn't be in LC names, things like that. So that kind of drove the main impetus for this. And the other reason was we also kind of wanted to define some new predicates that we could use in Oregon Digital that would have at least some definition, and maybe others would want to use them too. So the app that powers this is called Controlled Vocabulary Manager, and that is available at GitHub. There's a link on the homepage. A little bit about the name. So back in, I think it was 2013, several of us went up to UW, and then we're coming back on the train. And at the time, this included Tom Johnson, Karen Esland, and we can't remember who came up with Opaque Namespace, but I think it was either Tom or Karen, and then Karen pushed for it. Others were less enthused, but we went with it. Also, Jeremy Eccles and Trey Pendragon and myself were there, and so I think Tom registered the domain, and we went with it. And because we wanted something that wasn't specifically tied to Oregon, we did kind of want something that others could use. So just to show a couple things real quick. So we used, for rights in Oregon Digital, we used some from Europeana or Creative Commons, but we also added a couple others. Again, we needed URIs, so we added them. Ones we felt, at least at the time, weren't kind of served elsewhere. And then, so we kind of have our own local creators. Again, a lot of this came out of ContentDM. Some of the things listed on this vocabularies page are actually just predicates, and we are working, others on the team are here, Linda and Josh, and so again, we're working on this quite a bit. It functions. I think this is still loading. This is a big one. Yeah, here we go. So this is our local creators, and as you can see, there's a whole bunch of local URIs we've created when there wasn't a known connection to another authority anywhere. And then if we do find them, or as we kind of resolve names or entities, we can do a same as, or we can do another connection, or even deprecate a term and say it was replaced by. So again, this is under active development. We are looking at doing expanding the fields we have, expanding kind of the vocabularies. We're working to model our academic units of the university back through time and have that all in here. Because again, we'll need that for our institutional repository. We might also use it We could use those as subjects in Oregon Digital or possibly a future app. I know our well, so another thing was buildings, campus buildings. I was going to show those. This page badly needs a sort, and there's a ticket for that. Oh, here it is. So to give each building a URI, or again, buildings often change departments or change, affiliations, and we want a way to reference those. So this is a start, and it works, and it gives us labels. And yeah, if you want to learn more about this or have questions or want to use it, you can contact us through OregonDigital.org. Thank you very much.
PowerPoint on the left desktop.
We're going to close. And then PowerPoint. Okay, next up is your metadata. What?
This project came about, basically, it's a one-off project sparked by a conversation in a social event at the library.
I can get you.
It fits in well with the model that Allison covered in her talk. Basically, the problem was about once a month, the East Asian Studies librarian gets a box of materials from the Delhi office of the Library of Congress in India. Included with it is MARC metadata describing the material. But to provide the metadata, the Delhi office takes the MARC records for the books, prints them out, scans those pages back in, bundles the page images into a PDF file, and delivers that to us. Awesome. To which I say, what? And so, of course, the question was, is there something we can do with this so that we don't have to manually read through the PDF file and look up each and every record and then do some lookup and import or manually rekey the records? And of course, my first answer was ask them to change their workflow. You could just do, and you're done. But apparently, they are not able to do that. We asked them to, we got some response. We can't do this. I don't understand why. You have the MARC records. Just give them to us. So apparently it's not going to work. We have, here's the PDF image. It's not bad. It can work with that. So plan B was something involving OCR. And so it split the PDF into images, OCR those images to create MARC records and deliver those. But after OCRing it, it's pretty good, but not good enough that the cataloging department wouldn't have to do extensive manual edits, which would probably be as much work as creating them in the first place. So dirty OCR would be bad records. In reading through them, I discovered that every single record contained an 010 field containing an LCCN number. And it's like, aha, unique identifier. I had a plan C of OCR plus LCCN lookup, and started working on that and split the images and OCR'd and get the LCCN, look that one up, and deliver those records to the cataloging department. And in the test case for the first file, it worked great. But some of the records were already in our catalog, so we had to do some duplicate removal. And the LCCN isn't really unique. It'll sometimes return multiple records from the OCLC catalog. And the very best problem was some of the pages in the PDF upside down. So went at it once again, added a few new steps of split the image, look for upside down images and fix them, OCR those, get the LCCN, look that up, look for duplicates, get the best unique record, and deliver those. And in the end, it's pretty much of a success. It was a small tool, a one-off, and at least in one small corner of the library, there's one guy who's happy. Thank you.
Can you consider going to India with the thumb drive and just...
All right. Fober.
All right. Hey, everybody. This transition will not be smooth. Give me just a second here. And so there we go. And full screen. Play. All right. And we're up. Hey, everybody. I'm James. Everybody say hi, James. Hi, James. Oh, that's great. I love those kind of reactions because the first thing that I'm going to show you today, as I spend 5 minutes bragging about what we're doing at the Nashville Public Library with the assistance of the Marmot Library Network in our discovery layer called Pica, the first thing that I'm going to brag about, every family member, every friend and library user that I've explained it to is like, yeah, that's the way the catalog works. What cool thing did you want to show me? And so hopefully with this audience, I might get a slightly more elevated response than that. We're going to find out here. I'm going to call it Fober exactly once instead of Ferber. It solves a problem that we have of bringing the same titles together. We call it record grouping. When we are really bragging amongst ourselves, we just call it awesome. An example of the problem is 3 years ago, almost to the day, our mayor announced a citywide read of Life of Pi. We had some 20 versions of editions and different bibliographic records covering what is essentially the same work of Life of Pi, including 4 separate overdrive things. We would end up with patrons with long holds queues on one title and available copies on another. Which, in the world of overdrive and automated purchasing, wasn't working out for us too well. And so here we see on y'all's left, the old version, we have them in a crazy chaotic arrangement. There's a couple of audiobooks together versions, maybe another audiobook on the next page, then print, the print and ebook versions. And it is very difficult to get the thing as quickly as you can in the format that you would prefer. Or if you don't really care about the format, get the thing as fast as you can. And so on the right, we see what a result for Life of Pi looks like today, where you see the single result, brief citation, which covers all of the text analogy formats. Within those, the formats themselves are grouped to show you all the books in one place, all of the large type books in another place, all of the e-books in another place, all of the e-audio books in another. And a little zoom in there. Therefore, if you don't really care which specific, who's writing the forward of the overdrive title, you click the place hold on overdrive and you end up in the queue that will get you the thing the fastest. We can. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I would be more than. Oh. And so what I can also do is repeat the question, which was a request to pull it up in the browser, which I'm cautious about, but we'll see how it goes. Oh dear, and I'm down to a minute. So if we do Life of Pi, my favorite is to do The Hobbit just because of how many crazy editions that we have. And so here we have, the first result for Life of Pi with all of the various formats showing. If we open up the ebook and we really do care which version of the ebook we're going for, we can select the appropriate one from this list. Is that what you were hoping to see? We can also go to the grouped work. So what I want to do is now explain a little bit about how this magic works, now that you've given me this overwhelming, oh my goodness, that's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Hey everybody, I'm James. Everybody say hi, James. All right, that's better, that's better. Yeah, so what was the cool thing that you wanted to show me? And so the cool thing here is, the way that it comes together is through the creation of a grouped work ID by normalizing the title and the author and throwing in the major class of format category. We end up with a unique ID where all of these things from the bibliographic records emerge with the same grouped work ID if they belong together. And that's the core simple idea that helps this work in our catalog. And that's record grouping, which is awesome. So, I'm from Nashville. Nashville is famous in 15 seconds for one thing. It's not country music. It is our partnership with the public school systems and their libraries. It is an amazing program where we help kids get access to our entire collection delivered to their school. It is this discovery layer that helps facilitate that, not only by helping kids find what they're looking for in their collections and the Nashville Public Library collection, but by also in the shared discovery layer, which we released this year, but even we also have linked accounts that allow them to do it so that they are, with one login, logging in to the school's TLC ILS, to our Millennium ILS, and doing all the patron functions that they need to do to get the things that they need. Yay.
Thank you. All right, so you might think there's a break. There is no break. Ha, ha, ha. The break is a lie. So we have our last few talks of the day. And first up is, do we have our speakers? Yeah. Come up on stage. Free your workflows and the rest will follow. Community-driven AV solutions through open source workflow development by Dinah Handel and Ashley Bluer.
All right, now let me drag and drop. They're like, come back. I think it's in Firefox somewhere. Did it get closed? Where's the other Firefox tab? You know? Did we lose it? That's Firefox. Oh, okay, like we had it queued up, but
are we in Safari maybe? Is there a Safari window down there?
I don't know.
Safari's down here.
We're in Safari. Safari's weird though. I mean, I could just do this.
We want to be in Firefox.
Do we want to be in Chrome?
I closed Chrome, so if you were in Chrome.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's fine.
Yeah. So you know how to do it per center road?
I'm going to do this. I'm going to drag this over. It's weird how many things get like personalized on your personal Mac and that you can't use other normal Macs. Here we go. Oh, I want it super big. And okay. All right. I wanted to preface this talk by saying that there's an homage to the GIF throughout this talk, but if you are sensitive to flashing lights, you seriously might not you should do whatever you need to do to be the most comfortable. But now that I've scared you, hi, I'm Ashley Bluer, happy to be here. I'm an applications developer at the New York Public Library on the digital development team, and I love it, and we're hiring. So this is Dinah Handel. She is a National Digital Stewardship resident at CUNY Television in New York. They'll get a new one of her, too, so in a way that they are hiring. But Dinah's going to start us off by talking about open sourcing audiovisual archiving and preservation workflows, software, and file formats in theory.
All right.
Hi, everybody. So there's sort of like a few, in theory, like ideas that we need to lay out before we keep going. So there's sort of like assumptions about library and archive work. The first is that librarians and archivists try to create and think it's really important to have clear, concise, good documentation of workflows. A large part of how many librarians and archivists work is to sort of figure out how something is done, so how materials are accessioned, processed, or digitized, for example, and translate those steps, so what we would consider a workflow, into a piece of documentation. The second assumption, or sort of in theory, is that librarians and archivists care about making information accessible to others. This is a fundamental principle of librarianship, so, and it certainly becomes more complicated in practice, but we typically describe the library and archive work that we do in service of access. Yet often, these two things don't go hand in hand with each other. So we're more concerned, and rightly so, with making the materials we have in our collections accessible to patrons rather than sharing how we made the material accessible. Occasionally, we might make presentations like this one, write blog posts or journal articles, make public versions of internal workflows available on our websites, but overall, there isn't the infrastructure or expectation for sharing the nitty-gritty details of library and archive workflows. And so Ashley's going to talk a little bit about practice now.
Yeah, so why is there a gap between theory and practice? This is the part of the talk where everyone's like, it's not our fault. We all want to do the best thing, but some things get in the way. Time and money. Oh, we have 2 cat slides, so we're fitting in with the code4lib theme. Like with many other things, play a huge role in our ability to turn a project dream into a project reality. Writing documentation is hard and underappreciated, and it's this real skill to be able to bridge the gap between a code base and human comprehension. It's also scary to put things out there on the internet. There's a shared sense of imposter syndrome, sort of regardless of the effort made or even the size of the institution. Like your code might not be good enough. You might not think your code is good enough. There's not enough tests. There's not enough documentation, or it's not clean enough for the high quality of the web. It can also be hard to deal with feedback. Of course, negative feedback sucks. It's always going to be hard. But even having to spend time answering questions or clarifying or helping other people use your code base, that takes time that is likely not allocated and dedicated to that cause, time and money. On top of all of this, AV is really hard compared to text or images, especially when someone is more of a generalist. Codec wrappers, format migration, the difference between digital and analog, or even trying to answer and explain what a video is, it can be challenging. So from an archival standpoint, quick initial accessioning just isn't a reality because in analog video and even some digital video, files can't be played back prior to migration. So MPLP is kind of useless. And once analog materials are migrated to a stable digital format, the file sizes are enormous. And their care can be made further burdensome by a diverse range of formats. There's no one generally accepted archival grade format, just a lot of opinions. And not one format is going to work for every institution. A small nonprofit, their solution is not going to be the same as the Library of Congress's solution, for example. Historically, AV has had to deal with proprietary formats in software more so than other forms of media found in libraries, likely due to the complexity and the large file sizes. So processing power on the average consumer computer has only sort of recently caught up with the needs of processing AV materials. So only just now standard video cards are sufficient for doing processing of archival grade uncompressed digitized film and video. So we can now do in-house what we used to have to rely on vendors and companies to do for us. Dinah's going to talk about open.
So in terms of open workflows, there's sort of some ideas or definitions that I'm going to use to contextualize the rest of what we're talking about. Some of these, like for this room and this audience, it's like everybody's like, I know this already, but we're just going to go over them to make sure that we're all on the same page. The first is open source. So what do we mean by open source? I like this definition from the Open Source Initiative that defines open source software as software that can be freely used, changed, and shared in modified and unmodified form by anybody. Open access. So what we mean by open access is like unrestricted access to information. Open access is commonly used in the world of academic publishing to denote a work that is freely available to read without subscription to journals or databases. And I feel like the same should apply to code. People should be able to find and download source code for free. Open file formats are a third really significant component of this, as Ashley said earlier. A file format defines the structure and type of data that is stored in a file, and an open file format then is the accessible published specification for the structure and storage of that data. Open file formats are usually maintained by a standards organization, and an open file format is platform independent, meaning that it can be used across software and operating systems. Using an open file format with publicly available specifications is necessary in digital preservation, as it allows for us to continue to render digital objects as operating systems and software change, which is crucial in combating obsolescence. In particular, audiovisual file formats contain a lot of information about the file because audiovisual files are significantly larger. And with proprietary audiovisual file formats, it makes future playback really difficult to do. And then microservices. So a microservice framework in terms of software sort of breaks down like monolithic software applications like with many different processes into sort of distinct pieces. So each microservice is ideally accomplishing like one discrete task. And I like to think about microservices as sort of like modular code that can be combined in numerous ways depending on the desired outcome. So now Ashley's going to talk about some goals.
Yeah, so earlier I talked about the fears of working in the open, but here's some of the benefits of working in the open. When thinking again about this gap between theory and practice, a lot of this weighs more heavily if the code-based burden is just on one person or one institution, or one person at one institution, and it can be alleviated when a project exists collaboratively. Projects are more likely to stay alive and thriving when many people care about them. As librarians, I think we're familiar with vendor lock, which keeps an institution locked into one system by preventing free access to an institution's own data. But with our software, I think we should be really thinking about and aware of institution lock. How can we create things that can be extended out to other institutions? And we've heard of a lot of great examples this week. Sharing vulnerability makes a project stronger, so knowing your project is out there will also make your project stronger. Having more people using your project will help you discover bugs and make it better. Global impact, we're all connected, so let's connect in ways that benefit all of us. And tangibility, second cat gift. Having an open workflow can make what is usually described as an abstract process more tangible. To bring this around to practice, at New York Public Library, on my team, we really strive for this microservices approach to development, and maybe even in a slightly larger term than when Dinah talks about microservices later. But we really want the ability to switch out any one part of a project for something better that comes along when it comes along. And not have everything tangled up into one overly large, bloated application. And I know y'all know what I'm talking about. And we do this by having clear endpoints to send data from one place to another. But what better way to know that your software component of your overall workflow can actually be swapped out into the future than if it can also be easily swapped into another institution's code base? Tools.
So what are some tools that we can use to help facilitate this process of open sourcing workflows? And shout out to the lightning talk earlier. I think that one of the most promising tools is like Git, either from the command line or through some sort of graphical user interface. I work with the graphical user interface GitHub a lot, and I see it as like a great possible centralized tool for hosting workflow documentation from different institutions. Sometimes I think that something like GitHub gets seen by archivists as irrelevant to the work that they do because they don't write code, but the GitHub website doesn't only have to be a repository for code. It could contain documentation of workflows like such as PDFs or even READMEs in Markdown that outline an institution's workflow and different specifications. I think a benefit of using GitHub for workflow and policy documentation is version control. It allows for the public to see how and why a workflow or policy has changed, which provides greater transparency into archival policy decisions as well as like archival labor. Some libraries and archives already do this, and it's really like awesome to see. Another thing is, it's not like a tool necessarily, but it's a space that I find really exciting with regards to sharing knowledge about library and archival workflows. The two librarians, Liz Wolcott and Anna Nitror, apologies for name butchering, that started Library Workflow Exchange, shared the same dream that I do, quote, a magical database that would allow us to find out what other libraries are doing to automate workloads. So they started this website. There's options to self-submit your workflow for institutions that don't have the availability to host on an institutional site. And the site also, quote, pulls from workflows from websites, blogs, conference presentations, GitHub, and a host of other places. I'm going to talk about two pieces of software that are examples of what we mean by open sourcing audiovisual workflows. The first are media microservices. They're a set of open source microservice scripts that I've been working on as part of my time as a National Digital Stewardship Resident at CUNY Television. Media microservices are written in Bash and use the open source software FFmpeg and perform much of the labor of processing digital media. So they really are our archiving and preservation workflow. And much of our documentation of how they work or what they do is stored in the comments within the code. As Ashley noted earlier, what's useful about implementing a microservices approach is that we aren't restricted to one workflow that's imposed by a software system, which makes it easier to adapt as technology changes or as our local needs change. And this is especially important with audiovisual materials, also because a lot of times digital preservation software doesn't have the functionality or isn't optimized to deal with audiovisual files. Media microservices are developed for our institutional needs, but they also work as individual services. So the GIF that's up here right now is I'm running a microservice called Make YouTube, which is transcodes one or multiple inputs according to the specifications needed for upload to YouTube. So, and because media microservices are free and open source, anybody can use them, and they can configure them using our config file to set up to process and deliver based on like local needs. So switching out server names or like having different addresses and file paths make it possible for other people to use them. Another example of open source audiovisual workflow is vRecord, which is an open source audiovisual digitization software. The vRecord was initially created at CUNY Television following a hardware and software update that rendered Final Cut Pro unusable for digitization. And so vRecord is downloadable via GitHub and Homebrew and has grown into a project that is worked on by many individuals at various institutions. It's really beautiful to like peek at the issue tracker and see like who is involved in this project. And it uses the open source software again, FFmpeg, and works with the Blackmagic Designs open source software development kit, which is hugely important. So vRecord obviously doesn't solve the problem of expensive and difficult to obtain hardware needed for digitization. It does make the process of digitization a little bit more accessible. And Ashley's gonna talk about her projects.
More projects. I'm going to talk about a few projects that are microservices that are developed in the open, or supplemental non-programming specific projects that are in the open. The first one is QC Tools, a project that I work on coming out of Bay Area Video Coalition. Here's an example of what it's like. Thank you. It's software that helps detect problems in digitized analog video. QC Tools is for running quality control and analysis on these videos for errors, which is great for doing inspection on video after digitization or after it comes back from a vendor. You're not necessarily doing this in-house. QC Tools works for single files mostly right now, but has been recently received a grant and funding and support from Indiana University to allow this to work as a microservice and add a database and a web server for batch level processing and analysis. MediaConch is another project that I work on. It's for video file conformance checking, so the video files are what they say they are. I did a lightning talk about this last year. It's funded by the European Commission, so the software is required to be open source if they give you that money, which is really rad. MediaConch is based out of Media Info. This is MediaConch running in the background, but I'm talking about Media Info, which is, I'd say, the most used media microservice among information professionals. Media Info gives you information about your files, but more importantly, it does it very quickly, and it even works on partial files and files that are in transit. So it's very easy to integrate Media Info into much larger projects, and this is what we intend to do with MediaConch as well. So not only do you get information about your files, but you'll be able to know if your files are happy and they're healthy and they're conforming to your institution's personalized policies. An example of integration of these tools is within Artifactual's Archivematica, which uses Media Info and will soon be using MediaConch as part of the suite of services that get files into digital long-term preservation storage. Media Content Artifacts will use Matroska, which is an open video format currently going through standardization process via the Internet Engineering Task Force Cellar Working Group. Cellar stands for Codec Encoding for Lossless Archiving and Real-Time Transmission. So we had to work really hard to get an acronym that sounded fun and sounded like archivist related. But this is to ensure their longevity as a recommended digital preservation file format. I'm going to switch up to talk more about like less programming heavy projects. FF Improviser, similar to vRecord, it's a good example of a small project that helps many people at a lot of different institutions, and it is work contributed by many people at many institutions. So it's a platform for sharing very small scripts, FFmpeg scripts. It's hosted on the Association of Moving Image Archivists open source committee's GitHub page. There's been a lot of collaboration in the issues section and through pull requests, and we've even had contributions come in from an FFmpeg contributor, so we know we're not writing bad scripts, right? And it's great to see so many people come together and share that knowledge, and all they needed was a platform with which to do so. AVAA, this is also coming out of Bay Area Video Coalition, and it's a wiki for sharing video playback problems. Here it is in action, where people can contribute their video playback errors, they can explain or describe problems, or they can figure out why their videos look weird and potentially learn how to fix them. This one says, can it be fixed? I think no, but you know. So free your workflows and the rest will follow. In conclusion, you can grow your projects beyond your own institution. More people provide more perspectives, more contributions make projects better, and we can provide each other with supportive environments.
Support. Additionally, when we don't have we don't have to spend time like reinventing the wheel. It opens up time for us to do other things that are like really difficult, like doing advocacy, writing the documentation, or doing sort of any other task that computers can't do. And furthermore, when we open source our workflows, we build a community of practitioners who can collaborate to make shared goals a reality. Here's some links about the stuff that we talked about. Our slides are on GitHub. Thank you to Dave, National Digital Stewardship Residency, NYPL, all free and open source contributors in the world. Free your workflows and the rest will follow. Thanks. Thanks.
You want to take any questions? We got 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Any questions? We have mic runners. Please raise your hand or make a signal if you want to ask any questions.
Anyone but Dave.
If not, great. Thank you. Thanks.
But I don't know if we want to turn it on. I'll just let someone else figure it out.
Okay. Next up is Indoor Positioning Services and Location-Based Recommendations by Jim Hahn. Slideshow. That's okay. It's Max. Play from start.
Sweet. Okay. My name is Jim Hahn. I'm a librarian in the undergraduate library at University of Illinois. To understand this talk, though, you have to know that the undergrad library was built underground. There is a research plot of soil that is the oldest operating research soil plot in the United States, the Morrill plots. For that reason, the undergraduate library could not be built above ground because it would throw shade on the corn. So students have to go to a subterraneous location to locate books in the undergraduate library, and this is some 30,000 undergraduate students. The service that we've prototyped will allow new students guidance to library items of interest. It promotes the availability of e-resources from their mobile device that just go overlooked when you're doing stacks-based browsing. As an added benefit, we're also able to show students the popular circulating items in the area they're standing. The interface looks like this. This is a prototype interface. At left, the blue dot is the location of the user's device, you can see a red dot of the location of the item that they searched for. The search actually happens in a different screen. This is part of a modular app, Minerva. So they search it in the catalog search, and then they tap the Wayfinder module. So these are, I'm talking about specific upgrades to our Wayfinder module of Minerva. So at any location in the library, you tap the button for related items near them, and this is where a query to our popular near me algorithm is generated. The popular near them results are then populated in the next screen, which is to the right. And as you can see interfiled there, we suggest, using EBSCO's API, we suggest a database that may be relevant to their location. We suggest electronic books relevant to the location that they're in, and then also popular circulating items. We do this with Estimote beacons. Estimote is a company that came out of Y Combinator. It's a startup. These beacons actually were proximity beacons, and we used 52 of them placed above the tiles in the undergrad library. The library measures about 50 meters by 56 meters. Inside of the beacons is a 2.4 gigahertz radio using Bluetooth 4.0 Smart, also known as BLE or Bluetooth Low Energy. The Estimote docs actually have the best analogy for how to think about beacons. You can think about the beacon as a small lighthouse, but instead of light, it uses radio waves, and instead of ships, it alerts smartphones of its presence. In real-world conditions, though, these get a range of about 40 to 50 meters. So we had some pretty good saturation, and remember, we used 52 of these. So for the rest of the talk, I'm just going to sort of unpack some of the processes that we use to integrate these beacons into the app, including that recommendation algorithm. I'll step through that code. Also, how we actually tested and improved beacon precision. Something we're still trying to nail down. This isn't, I wouldn't say that it's, we made some efforts at securing them, but I wouldn't say they are completely secured. So that's something that we're still working on. I want to start with step 0, which is the device locations are actually recorded in a SQLite table that corresponds to a 16 by 18 grid system of the library map. And then step 1, the Wayfinder app loads. It checks the Minerva APIs to ensure it has the most recent table of beacon locations. There is an indoor SDK that could infer position, but we chose actually to utilize a math library for inferring locations. And the reason why you need that is once you have the table and you've sensed the beacons, you still have a bit of an emergency in that you don't really know where you are yet until you've done some trilateration. Yes, we had a math emergency while we were developing this. So it's the process of determining absolute or relative locations of points by measurement of distances. We're not using angles. You can use the geometry of circles, spheres, or triangles. The spheres are not perfect in any real-world environment. The spheres are actually going to diffract and look weird based on who's standing there, where they are in the book stacks, and if it's passing through people who are in the library. So those are some variances. And then our API, I'm going to go from at the bottom to the top. We have a basic call number layout, which is a custom table we curate over time. Searching and filtering is done by ViewFind, and then the ranking popularity, which is sum total circulations, that's an Oracle database. We belong to a consortium, but if you're familiar with Voyager backend, it's Java connectors to the Oracle database to get recommendations for popularity, and that's actually from the last year of circulations, not total time. So we want to keep it relevant. So in order to process the recommendations, we filter through several server-side functions, beginning with current location. So this is all based on once you tap that button, recommendations near me, we get the patron location, and then based off patron location, we get the shelf ranges from our custom DB. Once we know the ranges of a nearby stack, we get relevant books and ebooks. And we filter for popularity based on this range and add any ebooks that would be relevant. Finally, we also add relevant databases to the patron starting location, and this gets serialized as JSON. The Android app consumes this JSON to create the location-based recommendations view. A little bit about beacon locations. we had our facilities department help us put these above the tiles so that students wouldn't, one, they wouldn't know that they're there, so they wouldn't be able to steal them. So they're above the tiles. We had to introduce different access there since we tried them in the stacks, but actually that metal diffracted the signal too much. And in my office, there were tiles, so I studied how it would work in my office first, and then facilities got on board and helped us put them across the library. There's a courtyard in the middle, so no beacons are required there. And then we have a computer science team that we work with every semester. The students developed this interface for testing. It provides a view of what beacons the app can see. It lets us know how well the program is inferring locations, and also helps us test out latency. Another tool that I really liked, and I was using my iPhone to go through the stacks and see what the Estimote app, there's actually an Estimote testing app, and you can see sort of where you might see some sparseness based on where you've placed them. And at the far left, that represents some sparseness. That's an area with only 2, so trilateration is going to be difficult there. We want to see at least 3. So the far right shows at least 5 beacons that the app can see. So this area, I'm just going back a few slides here. This area is really like the bottom left component. Right when you walk in, it's not really saturated enough with beacons. So that kind of told us right away that we need to add 1 or 2 more. So I'll conclude with some thoughts on security. It's in the cloud, but what does that mean? Our email address that we use to purchase these devices, that's where we can sign in and actually set the signal strength. But then you need to sign into the app and then go out in the library and send it its commands to work on signal strength. Someone could maybe figure out how to hack that if they got your passwords. Another thing that we're interested in securing is the local database that tells us the XY coordinates in the library. All that anyone could do if they signed in here would be to delete all the locations or just add locations, but that's still something I'm really concerned about securing, actually. So those are some initial efforts, but I think there's also an entry point into Internet of Things technologies, and there are security considerations when there's a middleware component, the Estimote cloud, that we don't know a lot about. So we're always looking for ways to navigate that and maybe make it a bit more secure. So I'll just conclude by noting some next steps. We're gonna push this update to the Android Play Store. It'll be an update to the Minerva app this summer, and then we have a project page for some of our prototyping projects as well. Thank you.
We have 1 minute for questions. Raise hands, make signal for mics. 2 right here.
Got a quick question. So in addition to wayfinding, have you looked at any uses of this to do any sort of heat mapping of where users that may not be actively using your app for wayfinding, but where they're locating themselves within the library now that you have this kind of mesh network of location identifiers?
That's a good idea. We haven't done that yet, but I think that's an open question to explore more. While we still have print stacks, we could look at things like that, yeah.
Okay. Time's up. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next speaker is coming up. All right, so the title is A Chain. I want to say combo breaker in this one, but I'll save that for later. Archive space, Archivematica DSpace workflow integration by Mike Shallcross.
Thank you. Oh, man. All
right. This is my greatest fear, getting this thing to work right. Hello, my name is Mike Shawcross. I'm from the Bentley Historical Library, and I'm grateful that Shira, Alice, and Julie gave some digital preservation preliminaries the other day, and I think there's some synergy with what Dinah and Ashley were talking about in our project as well. So, as I said, I'm from the Bentley Historical Library. We are the official archives of the University of Michigan, and we also are a repository for papers and records from individuals and organizations from around the state of Michigan. And in April of 2014, we received a grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation to integrate functionality of ArchiveSpace, Archivematica, and DSpace in an end-to-end Born Digital Archives workflow. And the development work in this project is being done by the good folks at Artifactual Systems, who are the developers of Archivematica. So before I dive right into the project itself, I just want to talk a little bit about why we embarked upon this. And a big reason is that we had a number of homegrown systems. I hesitate to use the term bespoke. I think that might connote too much something artisanal, but we've been using some Microsoft Word templates with some macros tied to styles to generate encoded archival description. We have our local FileMaker accessions database where we record acquisition information and track donors and whatnot. And we, I guess around 2012, developed a Windows command prompt interface for ingest, and it's got great ASCII art, but it's still not the most user-friendly thing. So those are some issues. And in 2014, we also had a reorganization where we originally had 3 different processing units. Our university archives, our Michigan Historical Collections, and our digital curation unit all kind of did things on their own. And so we wanted to bring those under one umbrella and also standardize our descriptive practices across all formats so that our users had more consistent experience when they were looking for and trying to access information. Then we've also had kind of a shifting repository landscape. Since 2008, we signed a memorandum of understanding with our main University of Michigan library, from which we're administratively separate, to use their DSpace repository. And DSpace isn't ideal for complex archival collections, but it was a lot better than what we had, which was kind of saving stuff on CDs or hanging it off our website. So this was a real jump forward. And then shortly, though, after we received our grant, we learned that the University of Michigan Library wanted to move to Hydra. And this past year, they became a Hydra partner. So that's also kind of impacted our work. We've been thinking about how we can, we're focusing on a solution that involves DSpace, but we also want to be agnostic enough so that we could swap out that back end and put another repository solution in there. And finally, and this touches upon what other folks have talked about in discussing archives and archivists here, we see a real value in archival integration, or archival intervention. Key functions and principles of archivists. And so the appraisal and selection of content for preservation is a really big concern for us because we can't save everything. So we have to kind of focus our resources on what we can. And then also just documenting the context of materials, which includes both the provenance and the original order, the provenance, who created it, what functions or activities this material is related to, and the original order in which it existed when it was originally created, used, and maintained. So that's a little bit of background. And our goals for the project are to streamline the ingest and deposit of content in a repository. So we're looking for greater automation to both increase efficiencies and also reduce the potential for human error, and also to empower more of our staff to deal with digital archives. We're trying to move away from this notion of digital archivists. I mean, we do have a person on staff who's focusing on the really thorny issues of digital curation, but we want to bring more people into the fold and work with this material because really the principles and the descriptive work are the same no matter what kind of format it is. We've also are trying to establish a curation ecosystem. So, in terms of the tools that we're looking at, each platform kind of addresses a different part of the digital preservation lifecycle. ArchiveSpace, documenting acquisitions, being a system of record for descriptive, administrative, and rights metadata. Archivematica being an ingest tool that produces archival information packages and places them into storage. And then DSpace serving as a preservation repository and access portal. But we are, also taking this microservice approach. We're trying to employ the right tool for the right job and avoiding overlap between things. And I think a big part of this ecosystem notion is that we want to facilitate the creation and reuse of metadata across systems so we don't have to enter the same information multiple times. And finally, we're looking to participate in larger communities of practice. I mentioned we had these homegrown solutions. We want to kind of move away from doing it on our own. And with this grant in particular, we're trying to find solutions that meet our local needs but are also applicable to others in the archives and digital preservation communities. And as part of our grant, we're going to be sharing all of our project code and documentation. The development work that Artifactual Systems is doing will be integrated in the source code of Archivematica. And moving forward, we're looking to collaborate with these larger communities to support and develop these tools and solutions. So I'm going to run through these key development tasks in my upcoming slides, and I kind of consolidated them into 3 large areas. The first is the development of a new Archivematica appraisal tab. So both, I guess, intellectually and physically in the Archivematica dashboard, we've placed this new appraisal tab. Because I guess when we kind of launched the project, we had Evelyn and Justin from Artifactual come out for a site visit. And one of the things that became apparent to us is that Archivematica is a great tool for ingesting material, producing archival information packages, but there wasn't really a chance for archivists to interact with materials, to kind of understand what the content is. And so that's the idea for this appraisal tab. And we also realized that there's a lot of really rich technical metadata that Archivematica is collecting and generating as it is working, kind of working with the content itself. So we were looking at ways we could try to reuse that to help archivists get a better handle on what they're working with and to document that information. So this is the current appraisal tab, or a recent version of it at least, and it's actually divided into some separate panes. On the left there is a transfer backlog pane that kind of shows the content that you're working with. In the middle, and each of these panes you can toggle it to turn them, kind of make them appear or disappear. The middle one is right here is an analysis pane where we can learn some more about the content. On the far end is a file list pane that provides a listing of all the content. Starts with what we select in that transfer backlog pane. And then there's also an archive space pane, which I'll touch upon in a bit, and an arrangement pane for those who aren't actually using archive space to kind of create submission information packages that represent the intellectual arrangement of materials. So some of the stuff that we can do with the appraisal tab is we're reusing some of the file format information to represent in both a table, like a report format, as well as a visualization, the distribution of file formats. So we get a feel of like, well, what's actually in this accession of materials? What's the variety? Are there any things that are particularly thorny or potentially problematic? We're also reusing information from the examine contents microservice in Archivematica, which is running bulk extractor and various scanners to pull out information. And we are particularly interested in trying to identify content that has credit card numbers or personally identifiable information, particularly social security numbers. So in part of the analysis pane, we are able to look at content that has had a hit according to bulk extractor, and then actually preview that and review it and see, is this a false positive or is it really like a social security number or something here? I mentioned that file list. You can sort, it has the full path of files as well as their size and last modified date. And so you can sort this, you can actually click on files and it'll appear in, there's a preview kind of window in the analysis pane. And currently it only supports things that your browser can actually display, but you can, but if your browser can't display it, you have an opportunity to download it. So again, this gives you a chance to kind of actually see what the content is and get a feel for it. You can also tag materials throughout this in both the transfer backlog pane or in the file list or actually in that, that bulk extractor kind of examine contents window. And this is just to record notes as you're going through an appraising material. If there's information, if there's sensitive information, you want to tag that so you can keep track of it. This could be, you can record information associated with the arrangement of it or things that need to be deaccessioned. But these tags aren't persistent, but they do stick around, and they are saved over sessions. So next is Archivematica archive space integration. So we have an archive space pane that loads an actual tree from a resource record in archive space, displaying the display titles. And from this, you can create children of an archival object. You can add or edit metadata. You can add premise rights information to archival objects. And you can also create digital objects and associate them with components of our archival objects. So this is a window showing the metadata that you can edit. Archive space has digital objects where essentially kind of a manifestation of archival description. And so we can create a digital object component, drag and drop content onto that, and then when we finalize that arrangement, and it kicks off Archivematica's ingest procedure and goes on and produces a submission information package. All the while, Archivematica is using the ArchiveSpace API to write this information to an ArchiveSpace instance. For the DSpace integration, we're using the sorted protocol to deposit data and metadata to the repository. This has involved some repackaging of the Archivematica ape. So essentially, the descriptive and administrative metadata is going into a private zip file. The content is a public one as it's deposited into DSpace. The Archivematica storage service can put all this together. On deck, we're looking at some additional work, and here's some links. So thank you. And there's an Archivematica camp at put a plug in for that.
Thank you. The time has come for the last presentation. No, wait. Penultimate presentation. Scribe toward a general framework for community transcription. And this is going to be the last name I'm probably going to butcher.
It's Baudouin.
Baudouin, thank you.
Or Bedouin, if you're from Quebec. Yeah, where is it? No. It was loaded up here. There was a tab, and now it's gone. No, I don't. Sorry, I had a tab loaded up here, but it's gone now. Sorry, can you type or something? Yeah, thank you. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, my name is Paul Baudouin. I work for NYPL Labs, R&D. And this is a talk about Scribe, a framework for community transcription. But I mostly want to talk in general about things we can do to extract data from our digitized assets. So, does anyone recognize this elephant? This is a famous elephant. I have to admit, wanted to see it at full scale on these massive screens. I don't always have access to screens this large. Just about got it right, I think. So the significance of this elephant, there is significance, will be made clear later in the talk. So cultural institutions, nothing new here, of a certain age have this problem of having a lot of data that's stored away in forms that are difficult to analyze. I'm thinking of things like this. So at its heart, there's a wealth of data here, but it's not expressed in discrete human terms. Our minds are really great at looking at this bitmap and identifying the glyphs and phrases that represent discrete concepts and assertions, but the document as it stands doesn't lend itself to easy reading, much less aggregate analysis. Which leads me to this idea. So I want to strive to extract the semantic content from the bitmaps that we're producing out of digitization, because it's frequently not about the image. There's nothing objectively beautiful about this image, as far as I'm concerned anyway. It's more about we digitize these things because of the data they contain. So, and the thing is that computational methods so far can't really compete with humans for this kind of thing, which leads to this project that NYPL and a group called Zooniverse collaborated on in late 2014. It was an NEH-funded project to solve the problem of data extraction in general. So the Zooniverse, if you're not familiar, are these folks. You really should be familiar, by the way. They've been building a lot of crowdsourcing tools to extract data from photos and videos from the gamut of things, photos of the Serengeti, 19th century ship logs, my own personal favorite, Arctic penguins. NYPL Labs has also built a number of tools to extract data, notably Building Inspector, What's on the Menu, my own project Ensemble, many others. So Labs and Zooniverse came together in 2014 to pool our experience and resources and to build a general purpose community data extraction tool. And we debated the name for a long time, but somehow we still have Scribe. Scribe, the primary thing about Scribe is it's configured around questions. These questions can take a number of forms. The 4 primary kinds of questions are these. So meta questions about the entire document you're looking at, such as, does this appear to be a document of type, whatever. Questions about the locations of things inside that document, like prompts like draw a box around the document title, or click on each penguin that you see. Questions about those things previously identified, so transcribe the title shown, or is this an adult or juvenile penguin, for example. And then sort of meta questions about those questions, or rather questions about the answer to those questions, which amplify or reduce the validity of those previously supplied answers. You can imagine this chain of prompts forming this sort of tree that extends, as you see, from left to right, where at the beginning we have these primary documents upon which a bunch of marks are made, upon which a bunch of transcriptions are made, and then depending on the degree of agreement about those transcriptions, potentially a number of flags that amplify or reduce the strength of those assertions. So the primary thing is that at least initially one doesn't need to configure a schema in Scribe when configures questions. So let's quickly look at Immigrant City in particular. So this is a project around mortgage records from Immigrant City Savings Bank in late 19th, early 20th century. It's been running since November. We have a dedicated about 5,000 contributors who have submitted about 500,000 individual classifications. And these classifications, it's a general term for anything from drawing a box, transcribing text, voting on one of potentially many competing transcriptions, or doing more meta things like flagging an individual document as being done or invalid. The dedication looks something like this. So the core of our contributors are submitting between 10 and 100 classifications. The more dedicated people, about 800, are submitting over 100. And the cream of the crop, the 2% at the very top, submitting more than 500 classifications, of which there are about 100. In one case, one person submitted 32,621 classifications over the course of this 4-month project. So let's look at how that plays out in terms of a single chain of classifications, just to make how this works a bit more real. So in Immigrant City, one day a user was presented with this and asked to mark the amount loaned, which they did, in addition to marking and a bunch of other things. And subsequently, a different contributor encountered that user's mark and typed what they saw. In fact, within 20 minutes, and I know this from the logs, 3 distinct users encountered the same mark and transcribed the exact same text, which, in the logic of Scribe and Immigrant City in particular, immediately escalated that to consensus data and we know that this particular record, or at least we're pretty confident this record represents a $200,000 loan. So also another thing to note is that Scribe does actually have this optional facility for mapping the answers to these questions to a custom schema. This is a late edition, it's not yet in master, but it is something that we're working on. And this allows you to define this custom schema with custom fields which can be associated with primitive types like ints and dates and dimensions. And we see that applied here to a not perfectly confident transcription, because I think that probably because of the year, it's not clear if it's 1880 or 1870. But in any case, we have two distinct transcriptions, pretty good confidence that it's 1880 in this case. And because we're mapping this to a date and doing the proper reduction of that to represent it as a full date, we can run queries like this. So here I'm filtering on records between 1885 and March 15th, 1890, arbitrarily. Similarly, because we're interpreting the free text transcription of the amount loaned field I showed earlier, we can make, so making the common substitutions and stripping out non-numerics, we can run queries like this to inspect the highest payout mortgages in the $400,000 to $200,000 range, which is a lot of money in the late 19th century. And so this gets back to the elephant finally. So in perusing this list of names the other night, I noticed a name. And folks familiar with the big players in late 19th century Manhattan will recognize this name. I recognize it because of a coloring contest that I participated in when I was 8 years old, and that I won. Thank you. If you take one thing away, it's that I'm really good at coloring. So it turns out that P.T. Barnum of P.T. Barnum's Greatest Show on Earth, formerly P.T. Barnum's Greatest Show on Earth and the Great London Circus Singers, Royal British Menagerie, and the Great International Allied Shows United, and author of The Art of Money Getting, The Art of Money Getting, which he published in 1880, in which he had a whole chapter cautioning young people against the dangers of borrowing money, did in that same year, December 13th, 1880, take out a loan for $200,000 from the Emigrant Savings Bank. Within about a year and a half of that, he purchased Jumbo. I'm not saying there's a direct relationship between this loan and Jumbo necessarily. I'm not saying that the Emigrant City Savings Bank bankrolled Jumbo, but I await correction, I suppose. So I encourage you to check out Emigrant City, Scribe, if for nothing else, for the conceptual approach, UI conventions, and moreover, I just want to encourage us to seek ways to extract this kind of data to fuel these kinds of primary source Wikidata rabbit holes. Thank you very much.
Is your laptop?
Oh.
Now it's the last presentation. Ready to go? With Edward Corrado?
Yes.
Yes. God. Issues to consider before pushing out an open source project.
Being the last one up here, I think it's one of my duties to start off by thanking everyone that put this conference together. I really appreciate all the work the local people did, all the volunteers. They put on an excellent conference. Can we get a round of applause? Okay. So I'm here to talk about issues to consider before pushing out an open source project, which in itself is a project. A few of us went to a conference, IPRES, the International Preservation Conference, in November, and we attended a workshop called Roles and Responsibilities for Sustaining Open Source Platforms and Tools. And as part of that workshop, there was breakout sessions where smaller groups got together and decided to work on a project, some sort of interest.
I ended up in a group that was interested in things to consider before open sourcing a project, because I have some code at the University of Alabama where I work now that we've been asked to share across campus, not necessarily to the world, but when we started thinking about what does this mean if we need to share this code? How much time are we going to have to worry about support? What are the licensing issues? What types of things? Because if I'm going to share it to people on campus, why not share it to a larger community where we still have a lot of those issues? So that was why I was involved. But the checklist was nice. It was a really good start, but due to limited time, it wasn't really substantive. It didn't really have a lot of substance. It didn't have a lot of context. So three of us with really different backgrounds actually decided that we wanted to move this forward, and we decided to write a report, a white paper. I don't know what to call it yet. Maybe it's an article. I don't know. But we're working on something that we think is going to be useful for the community, for people to share about this. And the real reason why I'm up here is to tell you to give us your feedback and your help and to make you aware of this project that we're working on. So who are we? Me, Associate Dean of Library Technology at Alabama. Carl Wilson, who's from the UK, he's in the Open Preservation Foundation. He's currently kind of the lead on Jove and on Vera PDF, so he really knows a lot about code and trying to grow projects. Brett Currier, who's on Twitter right now, but couldn't be here, from Texas. He's Director of Scholarly Communications. He's also got a law degree, so he was able to talk a lot about the legal aspects. And then later on, we included Joachim Young, who's now the Executive Director of the Open Preservation Foundation. So we got a really good, diverse background. We got some Europeans involved. We got some people from the United States. So we're trying to make this kind of international. So the report's still a work in progress. I wish we had a complete final thing, but actually we'll never have a complete final thing. Things change. We hope this becomes a continuing, growing document, a living document, if you will. But it is actually at the point where it can be shared. It has a lot of formatting issues. There's a couple places not still in it. I haven't actually seen the current version because I know that Carl Wilson was working on it this morning, trying to finish up a few spots. So it's kind of a work in progress from that standpoint. So just to give you a really brief overview of some of the things that we're talking about, before you start, review your current landscape. Is there other software there that's doing it? Do we really need a 21st widget that does the same exact thing, or would it be better off working with some other people? And why do you want to release it open source? Do you really want to release it open source? You don't really need to. You can share code and share programs without it being open source. Terry Reese with MarkEdit is a great example of a really great project. That's not open source, but a lot of people use it, and it's a wonderful project. What are some of the legal considerations? Copyright. Remember, international audience, copyright and software license codes, quite different. And actually, a lot of people probably don't really know what their country is. They think a lot of it, maybe in the United States we have a good object, but I know in preparing this paper, we discussed that in Germany, the laws are quite different, and a lot of people that are developing code in Germany don't actually realize that their laws are different in what they can contribute. Make sure you plan, manage, have a roadmap for your project so you can help assure sustainability. Make sure you test. And how do you really build your project? We had this great talk the other day by Sebastian about how are we going to get this library platform from that box to actually something people can use? Well, you know how you do that? You do that by building community. But community doesn't just happen. You have to work at building a community. You have to communicate. You have to have a mission statement. You have to make features and requirements clear. What's the development status? How many people have looked for an open source project and then found a page and wondered if this project's actually still live or not? Exactly. Be clear about that and be honest about it. Let people know where you are, what you're doing with this project. And, we're living in kind of the agile world now, so, make the code available as quickly as possible. But make sure, you have a README there. You have, some instructions on how to actually install the software and things like that. These are all things I know I've come across that in some projects I haven't had. And you need to develop a user community. I have on our screen one of our heroes from Wednesday talking about how to present, how to participate in an open source project without being a coder. You know, documentation's important. By growing the user community, you can have people contribute back to your project, maybe not necessarily by giving code, but by giving documentation, helping, you know, provide support on mailing lists. But you have to really grow that community. You have to answer basic questions about your software on a mailing list. You have to be visible. You know, even if they seem stupid questions to you, they're not stupid to the people that want to use your code. So you really need to kind of develop that community. But there's two types of community. There's the end user, and then there's a software developer. A lot of times as software developers, we only think about the software development community, and maybe a lot of that's the nature of what we're normally developing, but there are the user community. And your community will vary greatly depending on the project. Think of an open source web browser like Firefox. That community is not a lot of developers percentage-wise. You know, there's a lot of developers in that community, but percentage-wise isn't. Versus some project that's really made like a library that's made to be included in some other bigger project. That's going to be almost all developers that are going to be the direct users. So you need to know that there's these different communities, and you need to figure out what the governance model is, how code's going to be contributed, how you're going to set priorities, who sets the priorities, and how are they set. And again, you need to use standards relevant to your community. Think about text transfer identification clauses, and I know a lot of us don't necessarily like to speak with lawyers, but you need to. If you really want to grow a long-term successful project, you need to make sure that you have these issues, especially if you're working you know, if you're doing it all on your own, maybe it's less important, but if you're working for a university or for a business or a nonprofit, make sure you get that done. And, you know, make sure that you have a way to track bugs, feature requests, make sure you have people actually confirm that they're fixed, another thing that we heard about today, back on Wednesday. And so really, what's the future of what we're working on? We want feedback. We want to know what we missed. We want to know what needs clarification. We really want contributions. We think this will be really useful. Right now, it's a Google Doc that's about 30 pages, which is misleading because a lot of it's things that we crossed out based on earlier outlines and everything. So you can see that, and we really hope this is useful to the community. We want your feedback, and if you can participate and let us know, let us know what we're doing, what we're missing wrong, and let us know that it's useful. And there's a bit.ly URL to, because a Google Doc URL is kind of unmanageable. If you go there and you can see what we have, and let us know, make comments. It's an open document, people can edit it, and thanks for listening.
Hi, just one quick comment. Having worked on one of the bigger open source projects, your community page, I think that when you start with that, you need to start with where you're at and where you plan to be in the next few months rather than where you plan to go, because certainly it'll change all those things, except maybe the legal will change over time. And of course, choosing the license that may kill you down the road. So you have to be very careful.
Yes, really know, I agree with that point, but really know what your license is and actually what it means and what it requires you to do. I've downloaded a lot of code. The license is supposed to be, in the header of the code. It's not. So people that are developing software don't really even follow the license themselves. So make sure you know what license you're choosing, why, and what it means.
Thank you again. And I think that's a very appropriate presentation to end on, because we learned a lot of cool stuff. We're going to bring that back to our institutions and organizations. We're going to build. But what's the use of building if we don't have a community that will help sustain what we build? So thank you. You've all survived yet another year of code4lib. Congratulations! To reward you for your persistence, we have giveaways. Now, if someone can come up here and show me where the randomizer is, so we can... All right, so we have reached the actual end, but we have a little bit more for announcements. So as was indicated earlier this morning, this conference is really, really expensive. So we couldn't have done it and kept it at a low cost without all our sponsors. So again, I want to give a big hand to all our sponsors. And in particular, for those of you who were not able to attend Hi live stream, or for those of you who have made use of the transcription service, we want to thank Temple University so much for providing that service. And speaking of live streaming, you may have noticed this big panel table right straight ahead. Those folks right there have been sitting there all conference, making sure that people who could not attend were able to see the live stream and able to record these videos for whenever the internet, decides to go away. So I want to thank the streaming team for all the hard work. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And planning a code4lib conference is very, very unforgiving, especially for a core group of folks, and that is the local planning committee. So for 2016, I want to say, local planning committee, either stand up, get up here, get recognized. Get up here, come on. You have now joined the rank of the few, the proud, the poor, poor bastards who had to organize this damn thing. But outside of the local planning committee could not have pulled this off without the multitude of volunteers who gave their time and energy to putting on the conference, either by organizing scholarships or programs, pre-conferences, social activities, childcare, streaming, a whole slew of different work, and including the whatever committee, just grabbing them and saying, hey, this needs to be done. So if you volunteered, please stand up so we can say thank you. All right, and for those of you who have some time, you're going to be staying in Philly for a little bit longer, we do have some hotel space available for Birds of a Feather sessions up till 4:30 this afternoon. One particular one that I want to point out is the Fedora Birds of a Feather. It will be in the Flower Room, and it will start at 1 p.m. Otherwise, remember that hotel shuttle will be on the 10 and the 40 of the hour until 5 p.m., $10 to the airport. Enjoy the weather. I'm happy to see you all again, and I wish you safe travels and see you in 2017. Thank you.